Is weird, odd, strange, or just plain bizarre is really your cup of tea? Then, the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast will give you that fix. Can't believe it? Well, listen for yourself as we deliver the strangest news you definitely won't find on CNN or Fox. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast.
By weight, water is 90% oxygen, which means that when you are drowning on mostly oxygen. Welcome to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Counterrevolutionary Caleb, and I am here today to bring you the weird news. We're going to start off with some lottery stories, including a man who stole a lottery ticket and then won. There's an even funnier part to that story. In the second part, we'll get to the disease section, including the fact that Kentucky Fried Chicken KFC is getting rid of its slogan, "It's finger licking good," because it does not promote safe acts during the time of COVID. It is in fact not healthy to lick your fingers, nor is it healthy to eat Kentucky Fried Chicken. Okay, in the third goddamn segment, we're going to do my favorite stories of the week, including a 20-year-old woman who was found breathing at her own funeral. And then we're going to wrap up with my top 10 goddamn weirdest remedies ever used. The weirdest cures for diseases, some of which were not in fact cures, some of which were in fact heroin. So we'll get to those. Alright, so we're starting off with the first lottery ticket story, and this is in fact my Florida story of the week, in which a Florida man is arrested for cashing in his lottery ticket to a gas station that he stole it from. I guess I didn't need to tell you that that was my Florida story of the week. A Florida man was recently arrested for trying to cash in his winning lottery ticket at the same store that he had stolen it from, according to Florida police. The Clearwater Police Department in Florida wrote on Facebook, quote, "For most people, it's their lucky day when they win a scratch-off lottery ticket, but not for this man." I like how they say "for most people," as though most people end up winning lottery tickets. Anyways, the man was reported when trying to cash in the stolen ticket, and he was actually accused of stealing 13 scratch-off tickets in total, each of which from a Speedway convenience store in Clearwater, Florida. Following the man's arrest, he was charged for petite theft and dealing in stolen property. So he's not just being charged for stealing the item, he's also being charged for trying to get money out of the stolen item. The Clearwater Police Department went on to say on their Facebook post, quote, "It is safe to say that this is not in fact his lucky day." According to jail records from the county sheriff's office in Florida, the man was also charged with driving with a suspended license, and is now currently being held at the county jail awaiting a bail of $12,000. Hopefully he can bail himself out with that lottery ticket. Nevertheless, he will be awaiting trial, which may in fact take a while, according to the police force. Now, the funny thing about this story is that it was actually inspired by another story, it seems like, as earlier this year, back in March, a man from Ohio tried the exact same scheme. He stole a lottery ticket and tried to cash it in the next day. The Columbus Police Department in Ohio reported a suspect who allegedly, following a store employee around the counter, robbed him blind, stealing his lottery tickets and cash on hand. The man used a gun during this robbery, which makes him quite a bit more violent than the other man we talked about from Florida. However, that's where his assertiveness ended, as just one day later the man came back into an unspecified store and tried to cash in the same tickets that he stole. So note to self, if you steal lottery tickets, don't plan on cashing them in. It's not going to go well. But now we're going to move on to a story in which lottery tickets did turn out well for a man, in which a man traded his favorite lottery ticket for another one and ended up earning $1 million. This occurred just last week on August the 21st, where a Michigan man said that a store was sold out of his favorite scratch-off lottery ticket. So he bought his second choice and quickly was excited that he won $1 million. The man said, quote, "I was looking for a different $10 instant game, but the store was out." The man said, "I saw the Emerald 10's ticket and decided to give it a try." He goes on to say, quote, "I scratched the ticket and thought I won $1,000 and set it aside. I started scratching the second ticket I bought, and all the zeros caught my eye. When I focused in on the prize amount, I couldn't believe it." When asked what the man would do with his earnings, he said he'll repair his house and invest the rest. If you ask me, now is not a prime time for investment. But hey, maybe he knows something I do not. And that is the end of my stories on lottery tickets. We are now going to move on to my listener-recommended story of the week. If you have a story you'd like to recommend for the show, just leave a comment with a link to the story, and I'll get to it eventually. You can also write some jokes for me if you'd like to do that, and I'll give you a god-dang shout-out. But for now, we're going to talk about a man who was high on meth when he tried to sell his child for $2,500 at a Kentucky gas station. Holy Lord. Apparently he was thrown in jail quickly after the incident. The child was only 4 years old. So the guy was trying to get, $625 for each year the boy was alive? According to the police, witnesses then called 911 once they saw the boy was being sold, and they gave the police a description of the car the man was driving. This eventually led police to the child's home just moments later the same day. After a speedy investigation, police found methamphetamine and other drug paraphernalia in the house, to which both the mother and the father of the boy admitted to taking earlier that same day. The man himself was charged with promoting human trafficking of a child under 18 years old and driving under the influence. In his court appearance last Monday, he agreed to plead guilty to the human trafficking charge, and he was sentenced to 1 year behind bars. He was also charged with possession of methamphetamine, third-degree possession of controlled substances, possession of drug paraphernalia, and 2 counts of endangering the welfare of a minor. His wife was charged with all of the same crimes except for the trafficking crime, and both are being held at the Knox County Detention Center. So that's the end of the story. A nice heartwarming story. It came to us from our great long-lost friend Bob Canton, who went on to write some jokes. Quote, "Yo, he took the kid back after he found out nobody wanted to buy his child." It's not really a joke, more of a sad observation. He goes on to say, "If you were that kid, what psychological inferiority complex is this kid gonna grow up with?" And then he goes on to make the negotiation. $2,500? No? Okay, how about $1,000 for the kid? How about $45 and a pack of Skittles? I can't blame him on that one. I like Skittles. Okay, that's the end of our listener story. We are now going to go with some engineering screw-ups. I like these ones a lot because I'm actually an engineer. So it makes me feel like my job is actually somewhat important. Alright, we're going to start with Sydney, Australia's new Fairies. They're giant boats who won't fit under the bridges if passengers are on it. And if you asked how this could happen, let me just start by reading the article. Quote, "The New South Wales government..." That's how it happened. "The New South Wales government has confirmed that 10 newly purchased ferries will not be able to safely pass under bridges along the Parramatta River if commuters are sitting atop the decks." So they bought 10 of these before, test driving it. I mean, really, these boats only need to do 2 things. They need to be able to float, and they need to be able to go under the bridges. They screwed up half of that. And they bought 10 of them. So although the main attraction of these ferries is in fact the upper decks, commuters must be called down before any boat goes under the bridge due to their low clearance levels. That is so terribly hilarious. What if the river rises like 5 feet? Then the boat can't pass under it at all? Anyways, the NSW Shadow Minister of Transport, Christopher Minns, has criticized the government's decision to purchase the ferries off the shelf rather than have them customly built. Quote, "This is another example of what happens when you buy off-the-shelf transport infrastructure from other countries. There are too many variables in our transport system." Dude, you just had to take a measuring tape to the bridge, spend like half an hour. Just send an intern out there with a measuring tape, and he'll come back and tell you how tall the boats cannot be. He goes on to say, quote, "We'd like the government to tell transport commuters what safety measures they are putting in place to keep commuters safe. It's hard to believe they went ahead with this order knowing that the ferries wouldn't fit under the bridge." So he's accusing them of knowing too much, which I think is really overstating the competence of government officials. You know, he's trying to assume malice on their part, but I think it's more just incompetence, and I think that's generally the best route to take when accusing people of this kind of thing. The man also goes on to say, now alongside late-running trains and COVID-ridden buses, commuters will have to worry about bridges knocking their heads off as they battle Sydney's transport. Certainly a dramatic character, but I like this fella. However, the spokesperson for the Transport for NSW responded to him, quote, "The process of customers moving to the lower deck between the bridges is already in place for the existing fleet of charter vessels currently used by the Sydney Ferries. These charter vessels have a viewing deck, while other vessels by Sydney Ferries on the river do not." He goes on to say that the ferries were purchased with the bridge clearance levels in mind. Despite this, the government opted to include the top deck in order to give passengers the option of open-air viewing for the rest of the journey. And this isn't the first time the NSW has been criticized for their transportation purchases. The last and most notable one occurred in 2018 when they were heavily criticized for ordering 55 new light rail trains, which cost them $2 billion. However, they were too wide to safely fit through some tunnels, as well as too wide for their train stations. Once again, next time just send an intern out with a measuring tape and you will save several $billion. The government was later forced to widen the tunnels and the stations in order to accommodate the trains. Proving that this is not in fact malice, but incompetence. Let's move on to some competent engineering, in which the UCLA engineers set a new world record for internet speed. Working with two separate companies, Zerta and KDDI Research, the research team of UCLA, led by Dr. Lydia Galdino, achieved a data transmission rate of 178 terabits per second, or 178 billion megabytes per second, just to put that in perspective. Which, for those who don't know, is a speed at which it would be possible to download the entire Netflix library in less than 1 second. That is just awesome. But imagine the data plan you would need in order to support that much download. I think I get 10 gigabytes per month, and every gigabyte's like an extra $20 or something. So what would that be if I used this internet service for a second? That would be a little over $3,500,000 I'd owe them just for using that internet service for 1 second. Anyways, this new record is double the capacity of any previous section currently deployed throughout the world. And here's the kicker part of it. I know this isn't weird news, by the way, it just fascinates me and it fit in with the section. Here's the fascinating part of this. The way they did this is just by using boosting amplifiers, which means that they're not using any new CPU computing system or new cables or anything like that. So all they have to do is apply this amplifier technology to existing systems, and they can literally just update existing systems by plugging these amplifiers in. So nothing really needs to be changed, but they will immediately double the transmission rate capacity for internet speed. However, researchers are saying that this speed is in fact extremely close to the theoretical limit of data transmission. Exciting news for nerds like me. Alright, that's it for this segment. Stay tuned to the next segment and we'll get to KFC pulling "It's finger looking good" from their slogan boards due to coronavirus fear. We will get to that and more in the next segment, so stay tuned, god dang it.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Water is comprised of hydrogen and oxygen, two explosives. When separate, and of course together as water, they have quite the opposite effect. Welcome back to the GSMC Weird News Podcast. I'm giving you some water facts this week, because I know that's what you're here for. No, you're here for KFC getting rid of their famous slogan, "Finger Licking Good." Why'd they get rid of their slogan? Well, as in all things occurring in 2020, it's due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Starting back on August 25th, the famous line will be torn away from any and all KFC advertising across the globe for the first time in the brand's history. The company explained in their statement, quote, "It felt a bit off given the current public health crisis." That is because due to COVID-19, you're supposed to be washing your hands, sanitizing your hands, not touching anything you don't have to touch, and most importantly, not sticking your hands in your mouth to lick them. In fact, it's so dangerous that it's said to be almost as dangerous as eating KFC. Anyways, KFC confirmed that it will later bring back their famous statement at an unknown date in the future. Quote, "The world has changed, times are tough, and everyone's needing to adapt, and that includes us." The KFC spokesman went on to say, "Our It's Finger Lickin' Good slogan has been used for around 64 years for good reasons. But we can all agree this year has been like no other, and right now, our slogan doesn't feel quite right. So, for that reason, we'll be pressing pause on using it in our advertising. For a bit, anyways." Of course, KFC is one of the largest fast food restaurants out there, being a subsidiary of Yum Brands Incorporated, which was founded by Colonel Harlan Sanders in 1952 in Kentucky. I've told this story before, but it's quite an interesting story. Colonel Sanders was broke and he got divorced and his child was mad at him. So he was gonna not live very long voluntarily, if you know what I mean. So what he did is he went to buy a gun, and on his way to the gun store, he remembered how popular his old chicken recipe was with some food truck guys, so he decided to try it out and franchise it, and now he's a billionaire. Well, not now he's dead. But anyways, the spokesperson goes on to say, quote, "We find ourselves in a unique situation having an iconic slogan that doesn't quite fit our current environment. In all seriousness, we think it's important to take a moment to have a little fun during these tough times. But rest assured, we'll still be providing finger-licking good chicken and a responsible experience for our amazing KFC family and customers here and around the world." So in his press conference about not using his slogan, he used his slogan. Anyways, he goes on to say, "And for all those fans, don't worry, the slogan will be back just when it is the right time. KFC is who we are, and Kentucky Fried Chicken is what we serve." And thus ends our KFC story. But I'm not going to stop there. As per usual, I dug a bit deeper and found some interesting KFC facts for you guys. So you can impress your friends. So we're going to start with the most interesting fact. Colonel Sanders once shot one of his business rivals. So Colonel Sanders, he ended up owning a Shell oil gas station, and he put up a sign outside of the building, an advertising sign, which was just a basic marketing tactic. However, it rankled one of his rivals, Matt Stewart, who operated a nearby Standard Oil gas station. Apparently, Stewart was so upset over the sign being eradicated that he rushed over there with a bucket of paint and painted over the entire advertisement. And in response, Sanders rushed over to the sign during the incident. He came with 2 Shell executive employees. And apparently, Stewart, the guy painting over the advertisement, traded his paintbrush for a gun and fatally shot District Manager Robert Gibson. This is so not funny, but it's kind of funny. Then Colonel Sanders returned fire and wounded Stewart. I like how this giant chicken mogul just has a firearm on him. I guess he is a colonel. Anyway, Stewart was sentenced to 18 years in prison for the murder, and the charges against Colonel Sanders were dropped after his arrest. Alright, our second fact. This one's pretty quick. Before he was Colonel Sanders, he was a lawyer, and he also delivered babies as a acting doctor. He apparently didn't have qualifications for either of those jobs. But apparently in Kentucky during the 30s, you could do pretty much anything so long as you claim to be capable of doing it. Alright, third and final Sanders fact. The man actually sued Kentucky Fried Chicken for $122 million after selling it. So he sold it in 1964, and in 1971 he became angry at the company, claiming that the chain's gravy had become, quote, slop, and the owners were also, quote, a bunch of booze hounds. He was mainly upset because he was still the face of the company, even though he no longer owned it. He got so steamed by the situation that he eventually opened up a competitive restaurant. So he was going to compete with his older restaurant, which he no longer owned. It was called the Colonel's Ladies Diner House. Yeah, that didn't turn out so well. Apparently KFC tried to block the Colonel's new restaurant endeavor, and as a result, Sanders sued for $122 million. But they ended up settling out of court, with Sanders receiving $1 million and a chance to, quote, give a cooking lesson to the executives in return for a promise to stop criticizing Kentucky Fried Chicken's food. Quite an interesting life this man held. We're going to move on now to my second disease story of the week. Japan group offers coffins, chainsaws for stress relief of COVID-19. So the idea behind this is that the Japanese group is trying to take people's minds off of COVID-19 pandemic by putting them in coffins and surrounding them by chain-wielding zombies. That's chainsaw-wielding zombies. Apparently during this, you will also listen to a horror story and watch as actors perform getting poked with fake hands and being squirted with water. Yeah, that doesn't sound too scary when you read it out loud. Quote, the pandemic is stressful and we hope people can get a bit of relief by having a good scream. This company is called the, quote, the Scare Squad, who will be putting on 15-minute shows, as previously described. One man who purchased a ticket for the event said, quote, lots of events have been canceled because of coronavirus, and I was looking for a way to get rid of my stress. I feel relaxed now. The man apparently paid $7.60 for the show, fairly cheap if you ask me. The showrunners went on to say, quote, we needed to have something that we could take anywhere, and coffins are easy to move. All you need to do is put them in a dark room. It's good for business. And for us, satisfying. It is also satisfying for our customers. God dang, paying $7.50 to sit in a coffin for 15 minutes does sound odd, doesn't it? But you know what sounds more odd? A 20-year-old woman was found breathing at a funeral home after being pronounced dead. That's what. This occurred in Detroit, Michigan, in which an older woman was believed to have died but was found breathing at the funeral home. Not an old woman, a 20-year-old woman. Sorry, I'm off today, folks. But don't worry, we're almost halfway there. According to the Southfield Fire Department, they released a statement saying that Pandemics responded to a call for an unresponsive female last Sunday morning. The paramedics arrived on the scene and found the woman, who was not breathing. Of course, the paramedics performed CPR and other life-saving methods for the next 30 minutes, until, quote, given medical readings and the condition of the patient, it was determined at that time that she did not have signs of life. The authorities went on to say in their own defense that it was part of standard operational procedure in a situation where foul play is not suspected for the medical examiner's office to release the person's body back to her family, who were to make arrangements with the funeral home. However, of course, only several hours later at the funeral home itself, the people there noticed that the woman was actually breathing. And now the saddest part of this story is that authorities are not allowed to release any additional information at this time. Apparently, it is unclear what led to the call of the unresponsive woman. So, yeah, but speaking of women in peril, a woman got punched after giving a reading at a church in Philadelphia. The Philadelphia Archbishop called the act a senseless act of aggression. The woman who was punched had just finished reading a Roman Catholic church segment and was punched as she left the altar. The attack took place last Sunday at the 11 a.m. Mass, and it was streamed live on Facebook, which means you can actually go online and watch footage of the incident happening live. I mean, you won't watch it live, but it happened live, which means some people got quite the interesting Sunday at-home Mass. So they go on to say, quote, the lecturer who was assaulted received immediate attention and assistance from the cathedral staff members off camera. She did not require medical attention afterwards. The church goes on to say, quote, such behavior is unacceptable at all times, especially within the confines of a church building and during the celebration of a holy mass. Apparently, the motive of this lady is largely unknown. She was eventually caught several days later, but she will not be being prosecuted, so that's up to your interpretation. However, the person who was attacked said in her own response that right before the lady attacked her, she heard something about, quote, respect and God. Before she took the first punch, she went on to say, quote, I saw somebody there that clearly seemed to be waiting there, and I was a little worried that she wasn't going to attempt to make a scene of some sort to disrupt the mass. So I was thinking that I wanted to do whatever I could to keep the situation calm and respectful, and so I just wanted to get back to my pew. She was then, of course, punched. You should go watch the video online. She gets punched like 3 times by this lady. And according to the police, the lady will not be charged with the crime, even though she was caught on camera doing it. Alright, next story. Our final disease story of the week. Hundreds attend an anti-mask mandate rally. Students encouraged to take off their masks get expelled. This protest was organized by the recently founded Liberty Action Coalition. The, quote, end of the mask mandate rally was put together and advertised online about 2 weeks ago. Basically a giant party where nobody would be wearing masks in order to protest the fact that the governor is enforcing that people wear masks. The LAC says their purpose is, quote, we are a union of individuals and groups committed to the U.S. Constitution and its principles. We act to educate others, support constitutional public policies, and elect officials who follow the Constitution. Anyways, the large group came out and protested the children wearing masks in school policy, saying that it was a violation of the constitutional liberties and a person's right to choose what to do with their own health and body. The creator of the organization said, quote, people are waking up. They're tired of the government thinking they are in charge. We are the government. The Constitution gives us that right. It gives us the right to elect officials to do our bidding. And they are not doing our bidding. They go on to say that it is their turn to step up and to act as the government until the elected officials, including their own governor, start to listen. Quote, until then, we don't have to listen to them. We have a constitutional right to take care of our own bodies and our own lives. One of the leaders at the protest then took out a megaphone. They were right next to a school during their protest, and she shouted at the school for the children to take off their masks, even if it means getting expelled. Quote, I was encouraging all of the students not to wear masks at all, and encouraging them to meet with their principals, if that's what it takes, and to get expelled from school. If we can get more of those numbers and more of those rebellious students against their violation of freedom, then it will be much more likely to be successful. One protester was caught saying, quote, I'm going to go in and to all of my kids' principals and show them the law that is written. It's Utah's law, and it says my kids will no longer wear masks, and if you want a lawsuit, I will give you a lawsuit. You can go online and look at all the pictures of these protesters. I'm going to read a few of the signs to you guys because I think they're kind of funny. One of them says, give me liberty or give me breath. She's saying she can't breathe with the mask on. Another one is of a kid who's holding a sign up that says, I refuse to be your experiment. This one's my favorite. Don't shame me for wanting to breathe fresh air. That one's pretty good. Another good one, rip off masks, not children. Yeah, quit ripping off all the children. Another one says, child lives matter, no masks. And then there's just a little girl staring at it. She's frowning. Maybe she's just upset that she has to go to a protest. She's probably not thinking of the issue and upset about it. You should go online. These images are pretty funny. Another one says, my children don't belong in jail just for trying to breathe. And then there's a lot of my body, my choice signs. They're all pretty funny. Some of them are pretty good, like, I prefer dangerous freedom over peaceful slavery. I don't know if peaceful slavery is really a thing, but nevertheless, this is where we have gotten with our protests. Alright, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next section. Stay tuned, we're going to talk about teens who allegedly broke into a New Jersey petting zoo and let a bunch of animals loose, and even put lipstick on a miniature pony. So that'll be nice and fun. Why don't you stay tuned for that, by God.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Weird News Podcast. We're going to get into my favorite stories of the week, starting off with this zoo story, in which a bunch of teens allegedly broke into a New Jersey petting zoo, and they let a bunch of animals loose. They even put lipstick on a miniature pony. Okay, first of all, why is a pony at a petting zoo? Those things are dangerous. Haven't you seen those videos online where the pony kicks a child in the face? I guess it is kind of funny. Anyway, police are now trying to track down the trespassers. Last Saturday at about 10 p.m., the owner of the petting zoo raced over to his property's barnyard area when he and his family heard the commotion outside. He allegedly began yelling at the group of at least 6 trespassers whom he saw on his property. While he was trying to figure out what the H was going on, somebody apparently sent him a Snapchat picture, which included a teenage girl with long platinum blonde hair. I think the person writing this article is slightly infatuated. Long platinum blonde hair and wearing a black crop top and ripped jeans. Sorry, it's just I've never read an article where the person writing it actually fell in love with one of the people in the story. Apparently this lady was riding a miniature donkey in the petting zoo. Shocking, isn't it? The family who owned the farm said the following Sunday that during the alleged barnyard crime spree, the teens, quote, opened gates and rode our miniature donkeys, who should not be supporting that much weight. One person took a snapshot of another person riding on our mini donkey and applied the Alabama's farm geofilter. So Alabama is the name of the farm, by the way. The family goes on to say, quote, we caught 2 other trespassers trying to steal. When we called the police, however, the 2 fled the scene. So you didn't really catch them, did you? In fact, I think you just saw them. You saw 2 people trying to steal. The teens allegedly tried to steal tables and chairs from the property. And most importantly, according to the owners, the animals were all shooken up. That is so sad. Quote, couple of the animals you couldn't even get close to. They were all skittish. They were jumping around. We did a full count on the animals, and we're still trying to account for all of them. So it's just a frustrating thing. A couple of our animals got loose from gates left open, and after thoroughly searching this morning, all animals were accounted for. They went on to say that in response to the incident, quote, first and foremost, we are working farm men, and our 4 families live here. This is our home. Second, from a human safety standpoint, breaking into animal pens with no animal training is dangerous. Animals can kick, rear up, and trample you in the dark. Anything can happen. So that's going back to what I said earlier. You can go online and find videos of donkeys and even sheep and horses, small ponies, kicking children in the face. And although it is incredibly entertaining, it is not good for the children. They go on to say, third, our safety of our animals has been compromised, and that is not okay. Our animals are now shaken and skittish compared to their normal relaxed nature. This is very troubling to us. And saddest of all, the barnyard ended up being closed last Monday so a vet could examine the petting zoo's 60 animals, which includes rabbits, sheep, pigs, goats, and at least 1 miniature pony. The police department's detective is working to, quote, identify all the parties responsible. However, as of yet, no arrests have been made. However, they are said to have very strong leads, mainly because the people actually posted photos on Snapchat of, quote, a female party who was riding a donkey at the petting zoo and other persons who were involved. When interviewed by the Daily Voice, the owner of the farm got quite steamed, saying, quote, the sheer disrespect that some people have is truly infuriating. There are teenage pranks, and then there's something like this. Unfortunately for them, we have pictures and names, and we will follow through and make sure everyone is held accountable. These kids have to deal with what they did. Authorities this morning have finally identified the New Jersey teens who broke into the local farm and posed for the photos while riding and, quote, abusing the animals. One of the teens identified was only a 17-year-old student athlete who was identified after a number of her friends saw her Snapchat photo of the farm trespassing and riding of animals. Note to self, if you commit a crime, do not take a selfie of yourself committing the crime. Time for the next story. This one is supposed to be sadder than the last one, if even possible. I just find it funny, though. Quote, so much tear gas has been sprayed on Portland protesters that officials fear that it has polluted the water. So, of course, tear gas has been sprayed on protesters for about 2 months straight now in Portland and other northwestern states. In the defense of the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality, quote, there is no scientific precedent for the long-term exposure of tear gas on humans, as it is not meant to be used often, which has driven those who oversee Portland's water infrastructure to question whether or not this will have an effect on the pollution from the constant gassings. Apparently on July 30th, environmental regulators in Oregon sent a message to the city of Portland saying that in response to the unprecedented amount of gas used by the city's police against civil rights protesters who assembled there in May and June, the officials wanted a thorough investigation to make sure chemicals did not cause lasting harm to the environment. They went on to say, quote, due to the unprecedented amount of tear gas products used within the downtown area over the last 90 days, the DEQ is requiring the city to conduct additional water quality testing and monitoring. Following the monitoring and testing event, the Oregon DEQ ordered Portland to submit a summary within 2 weeks that revealed the results of the investigation and compared the 2020 data with that from previous years at the same locations, assuming that they had been monitored for pollutants in the past. Quote, if a rain event that is likely to result in a discharge to the Willamette River occurs prior to the plan approval by DEQ, the city must contact DEQ and conduct the monitoring described above. And unfortunately, that is the end of the experiment as we continue into the future. The riots and protests are still continuing, as are the gassings. So this test is ongoing as they continue to gas everybody. So if you live in Portland, don't drink water, just drink alcohol. That's my expert advice to you. Alright, next story. A man wraps his neighbor's entire car in cellophane after it blocked his driveway. So this 49-year-old man from Kent, which is a place in the UK, apparently wrapped his neighbor's entire car in black cellophane after it blocked his driveway for an entire day and a half. The man apparently also left a note placed on the windscreen of the man who parked his car in his driveway requesting that the driver please remove the vehicle. But when the message did not get a prompt response, the man decided to take the law into his own hands. Apparently the vehicle was blocking his daughter's car from being able to get out. The man was further upset due to the fact that he already had put up signs asking people not to park in his driveway. He went on to say, quote, I live in a street with 26 houses and 24 parking spaces, adding that he and his wife had spent 2,000 euros installing a dropped curb and signs telling people not to park there, but people still do it all the time. He went on to say, quote, at least 2 or 3 times a week, we would find some idiot blocking us in. I came home from work one night and saw the car parked there. My daughter couldn't get her car out. I wrote a note and stuck it on the windscreen telling the owner to move it. But the next day, the offending car was still there. I just had a load of pallet wrap delivered, and I thought, right, and he wrapped it around the car. The owner soon came out after that. It was a young girl who had just moved in next door. Thankfully, the young lady took the prank in good humor and agreed to never park in the space again. Quote, she was a very apologetic, the man who wrapped her car said. He went on to say, quote, she said, very funny, and she said she won't park there again. He continued on, I am not a nasty person, I just like to get my point across in a funny and harmless way. That would not be seen as a harmless way in the United States. But I'm glad they take it with good humor, and if you are in the United States and such a thing happens, maybe don't get too mad about it. Just say, ah-ha-ha, what a joker. The man goes on to say, it only took her a few moments to take the wrap off, and her car was cleaner after because of it. You can go online and see photos of the taped-up car. It is pretty entertaining. Quote, Ireland is attacked from extremely aggressive seagulls spreading E. coli. So apparently reports of extremely aggressive seagulls have been popping up all over Ireland and other areas in the United Kingdom. This occurred to the point where the pest control provider Retchnol has issued a warning for the public to beware of the seagulls. Apparently this is due to the fact that around this time of year, the seagulls get a ton of children all of a sudden. It's just after their mating season, so this apparently makes them incredibly aggressive. The government went on to say that, quote, they are more likely to harass members of the public for food, or in extreme circumstances, randomly attack. I know that sounds kind of goofy, but one time I was at goddamn Laguna Beach, California. We were sitting there just eating pizzas, my entire family, and then a seagull flew down and took a pizza out of my sister's hands. They will do that. Beware of the seagulls. This is particularly scary during the time of disease, where apparently these birds are spreading E. coli faster than ever previously recorded in Ireland. Figures published by the Irish Mirror indicate a 12% rise in call-out of this kind, with Dublin seeing a 49% increase, which is just brutal, especially if you assume that people are tending to stay inside during the COVID pandemic. One field consultant on the situation said, quote, as lockdown restrictions are lifted and people start spending more time outside, this is the period of time when people and seagulls are most likely to cross paths. I live in Colorado, so we don't worry about seagulls. We worry about bears and mountain lions and bobcats and coyotes and wolves and damn dirty pot-smoking hippies. We simply don't have enough time for goddamn seagulls. He goes on to say, quote, to discourage the presence of seagulls and other pest birds from your home or business, keep any possible food sources well hidden and ensure bin lids are secure and rubbish bags are not left open. Gulls have sharp beaks that will make short work of bin bags. Holy Lord, that was a beautiful ending to the weird news of the day. Stay tuned to the next segment where I'll give you my top 10 most bizarre, oddest, and weirdest medical practices that were used in the past in order to save people's lives. Many of them did not save people's lives, but we will get to that if you stay tuned.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Water is one of the only substances on Earth that grows as it freezes, which is a good thing because otherwise it would sink to the bottom of the ocean and kill all the fish when it forms. Which would also be kind of funny, but we would all die, which would not be funny. Okay, we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about my top 10 goddamn weirdest ways doctors used to save people. Some of the weirdest medicines of the past. Number 10... the one you all saw coming, bloodletting. So it's known to be one of the oldest medical practices, dating way back, almost 3,000 years ago when the ancient Egyptians would use it. Of course, it gained prominence in stories written during the medieval age, in which Europeans would treat diseases such as smallpox, epilepsy, and even the plague by cutting somebody's arm and letting blood pour out of it. Turns out it doesn't actually work that well. And due to the spread of misinformation, it was commonly used all the way up till the 19th century. And it is even sometimes used in more primitive cultures today. Towards the end of the 19th century, the treatment was discredited when doctors finally admitted that depleting the body's blood supply can in fact be risky and doesn't have many valuable health benefits. Believe it or not, you actually need blood to survive. And losing a lot of blood can actually put you at risk for cardiac arrest. And of course, low blood pressure. in addition to infection and anemia, which you can get from the actual wound you cause yourself to lose all the blood. Alright, number 9, treponation. This is one of the scarier ones, and it is still used as a torture device. That's how scary a remedy it was. It is the practice of drilling, cutting, and even scraping holes into people's skulls. And much like bloodletting, it has been around since even prehistoric times, and is even believed to be one of the oldest surgical procedures ever. However, scientists are unsure why our ancestors performed it, as they didn't know anything about modern medicine where you would actually need to cut into somebody's head in order to save their lives. However, apparently in Western medicine, up until the 19th century, treponation was widely used to treat head traumas. The more fun stories are from ancient times, when people thought that creating a hole in the head of a person would let out all of the evil spirits that were possessing them. So it's kind of funny. It makes for interesting stories. I'm sure that'll end up in a movie someday. However, it's also quite tragic because usually it would be those with mental illnesses that got a hole cut in their head. And of course, there was no anesthetic back then. These people were wide awake while this happened. Number 8, arsenic. So arsenic is actually one of the oldest medicines, which dates back to ancient times, much like the past two mentioned. And even more importantly, of course we know today that arsenic is incredibly toxic, but they even knew back then that it had toxic properties. Despite this, the chemical was used to treat various diseases all the way up until the 20th century. Arsenic compounds were ingredients in many tablets which were used to treat diseases such as trypanosomiasis or the sleeping sickness, or syphilis. Good news. All right, we're going to swing this one in at number 8.2. So this is mercury, which is also incredibly poisonous. In fact, it's so dangerous that just inhaling it can cause damage to your internal organs, such as the lungs and the kidneys, and it has even been known to be fatal. Of course, when ingested, the salts in mercury can induce kidney toxicity. Despite this, of course, throughout history, the chemical was used to prolong life and maintain good health. For several hundred years, in fact, mercury was the key ingredient in a variety of products used to treat such diseases as melancholy, syphilis, and influenza. I like how they considered melancholy a disease. Maybe it is. Maybe I have melancholy. Goodness gracious, that would be sad. Alright, number 7, radium water. This one's pretty famous because it's pretty recent. It has only taken its popular stride throughout the medical world within the past century. The radioactive water was sold in the 1920s and did not contain huge amounts of caffeine, as some reports would have you believe. In fact, they just contained radium, which was dissolved in the water. Unsurprisingly, the drink was created by the Harvard dropout William J. A. Bailey, who we've featured on this show, I think 3 times now. He was one of the craziest mad scientists who ever lived, and also one of the craziest geniuses who ever lived. And unfortunately, that led to many people dying. Okay, number 6. The lobotomy. So this, of course, is also a pretty recent development. It occurred in the early 20th century and was considered a treatment for mental illness, a pretty scary operation in which the nerve pathways in the frontal lobes of the brain are severed. The scariest part is that they never had an entirely large amount of evidence that it would actually do anything, much less that it would have any positive effects on treating illness. Despite that fact, the lobotomy became a very popular treatment for mental disorders. Many people also considered it a miracle cure. However, many years later, it was considered to become a brutal treatment and even shameful and tragic in the course of medical history. Alright, number 5. Cornflakes. So, many people don't know this, but J.H. Kellogg, the man behind the Kellogg brand, was actually a full-fledged medical doctor and health advocate. In fact, his famous cornflakes were originally created to prevent sexual urges. More specifically, to inhibit the urge to, for children when they, okay. When they make love to themselves, that's what I'm trying to say. And apparently it was considered a huge sin back then. I think it still is today in a lot of places. And despite this, apparently Mr. Kellogg believed that his cornflakes was part of a healthy diet that would prevent this kind of activity. Unfortunately, the Kellogg's flaky idea did not provide the desired results. Tragic. Alright, number 4. Heroin. So initially, heroin was actually invented during an attempt to produce a drug similar to morphine that was less potent and less addictive. Boy, was that a failed attempt. Of course, it turned out to be 2 times more potent than morphine itself, and of course, way more addictive. It was also prescribed to treat coughs and other ailments, such as back pain and insomnia. However, it actually caused more insomnia than it fixed. Between 1898 and 1910, the cough syrups made with heroin were marketed as a non-addictive morphine substitute and quickly became the cause of one of the highest addiction rates among all medical device users. Many people still use heroin today, not really heroin, other opioids today, in order to, prevent yourself from being crippled by pain. I believe fentanyl is an opioid. It kills a lot of people every year. I'm pretty sure that's how Prince died, the musical artist Prince. And I know several people personally who have been prescribed fentanyl, so it's still used sometimes today, just perhaps not in its rawest form of cough medicine. Although that would be the best cough medicine ever. Alright, number 3. Vin Mariani. So this was a tonic that was introduced in 1863. And for those who don't know, it's actually just wine. But it was advertised as both wine and as a general cure-all product, promising to treat whatever ailment you may have. And of course, due to a lack of information, the tonic quickly became a sensation and was widely endorsed, used among many famous people of the time. Even the Pope and Thomas Edison claimed that it was a miracle cure. And it is even rumored that the tonic inspired the invention of Coca-Cola. The recent health studies have done a series of tests on the wine to see why it was endorsed by so many people, and the answer came back screaming, cocaine! The drink contained around 6 milligrams of cocaine per fluid ounce of wine, which is just insane. That would be incredibly expensive today. That is all I have for the French tonic wine, but we will get back to cocaine in just a minute. Number 2, tapeworms. This one's kind of gross, but I think it's really funny. But apparently during Victorian times, people came up with several radical solutions to reduce weight due to the fact that everybody was getting fat due to the growth and prosperity of the time. And their idea was tapeworms. The idea became pretty well known. The idea was that a person would eat a tapeworm egg so that when the parasite hatched, it would grow inside of that person's intestines and start to ingest whatever the person would eat, which would allegedly allow the person to lose weight without decreasing the amount of food they eat. Of course, it is well known today that tapeworms can be dangerous and, of course, disgusting, and even sometimes lethal. However, this questionable practice is still used today. Dun dun dun. Of course, I've never understood this theory that a tapeworm would help you lose weight. I mean, the tapeworm is in you, so if it eats the food that you eat, it's still in you. So the tapeworm gets heavier with that weight. You don't lose weight, do you? It doesn't make sense. All the weight that you've lost was gained by something that's in you, so you end up gaining the weight anyways. Doesn't make any sense. Okay, few honorable mentions real quick. The iron lung, very creepy thing. You've probably seen it in movies. I think it's in The Big Lebowski. They still use it very rarely today. But during the time of polio, the iron lung was used to keep children breathing. Pretty important, but also really scary to look at. Just being trapped in this machine because you can't breathe by yourself. Pretty scary stuff. Another honorable mention, the eotherapy. This is a really odd one, in which patients suffering from syphilis were treated with malaria. This would apparently induce a fever, which apparently was enough to kill the temperature-sensitive syphilis bacteria. It is estimated that around 15% of those treated with malaria died from it. Despite this, all the others showed great improvement. Kind of funny how the worst disease alive today was a cure in ancient times. Alright, time for number one. I kind of spoiled it earlier, but number one is cocaine. It was first used by a Japanese chemist in 1893 for medical purposes. It was used to treat a variety of ailments such as narcolepsy and asthma. And of course it was used as a weight loss drug. That's how I lost my weight. Cocaine and a lap band. And right now I'm looking at a old advertisement they used to have for cocaine. It says, "Keep the reducer happy. Cocaine and obesity. It means help. For those who eat too much. For those who are depressed." Cocaine dispels abnormal craving for food and subtly elevates your mood. Cocaine brand in 5 milligram tablets. It doesn't tell you the price, which I'm kind of disappointed about. And I'm sorry to leave you on that disappointment. But I will thank you for listening to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. And while I'm at it, I will also ask you to subscribe. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for all the latest weird news. And I will thank you and hope you have a good night.